On the morning of March 17, 2000, in the coastal town of Palmetto Bay, Florida, a 28-year-old woman named Jennifer Marlowe left for her morning shift at the public library, where she worked as a senior cataloger. She kissed her 5-year-old daughter goodbye. She waved to her husband from the driveway. Her white Honda Accord backed out onto Cypress Lane at precisely 7:45 in the morning, the same time she left every weekday. By noon, Jennifer Marlowe had vanished. Her car was found abandoned in a grocery store parking lot 3 miles from her home, keys still in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat, no signs of struggle. For 20 years, her family waited for answers. For 20 years, investigators followed leads that went nowhere. For 20 years, one person knew exactly what happened that morning. The question that haunted Palmetto Bay for 2 decades was simple and terrible. Where was Jennifer Marlowe? Palmetto Bay sat tucked against the southeastern edge of Miami-Dade County, a suburb that straddled the line between Old Florida and New Development. In 2000, it was not yet an incorporated village, just a collection of neighborhoods with Spanish-styled roofs and sprawling banyan trees, whose roots cracked through sidewalks and driveways. The area had been farmland once, tomato fields and pine groves, but by the turn of the millennium, it had transformed into a bedroom community for families who worked in Miami proper but wanted space, good school, and the illusion of distance from urban chaos. The Marlowe family lived on Cypress Lane, a quiet street where children rode bicycles in lazy circles and sprinklers hissed across lawns each evening. Jennifer and Thomas Marlowe had purchased their 3-bedroom ranch house in 1997, shortly after their daughter Emma was born. The house had pale yellow siding and a screened-in porch where Jennifer liked to read in the evenings, while Emma played with her collection of stuffed animals. Neighbors described the Marlowes as pleasant but private. They attended neighborhood barbecues occasionally. They decorated their yard for holidays. They seemed, by all external measures, to be exactly what they appeared, a young family finding their footing in the world. Jennifer Marlowe grew up in Coral Gables, the daughter of a high school math teacher and a dental hygienist. She attended the University of Miami, where she studied library science with a minor in Spanish literature. Those who knew her during those years remembered a woman who was thoughtful and organized, someone who kept detailed planners and always arrived early to appointments. She met Thomas Marlowe during her senior year at a campus coffee shop, where he worked part-time while finishing his degree in business administration. He was 24 then, 3 years older than Jennifer, a transfer student from a community college in Fort Lauderdale. Friends from that time said Thomas was charming in an unpolished way, quick with jokes, always offering to help move furniture or fix a leaking faucet. Jennifer's roommate once remarked that Thomas seemed to need taking care of, and Jennifer was someone who liked to take care of people. They married in 1995 in a small ceremony at a hotel overlooking Biscayne Bay. Thomas found work at an insurance company processing claims. Jennifer took the position at the Palmetto Bay Public Library, a job she genuinely loved. She came home each evening talking about book recommendations she had given patrons, about the children's reading program she was helping to expand, about the new cataloging system the library was implementing. Emma was born in December of 1997, and Jennifer took 8 weeks of leave before returning to work. Thomas's mother, Carol Marlowe, helped with childcare in those early months, driving down from Delray Beach twice a week to stay with Emma while Jennifer worked her shifts. March 17, 2000, began as an ordinary Friday. The morning was overcast, humid in the way South Florida mornings often are before the sun burns through the cloud layer. Jennifer woke at 6:30, the same time she woke every weekday. She showered while Thomas made coffee in the kitchen. Emma was still asleep in her bedroom, surrounded by stuffed dolphins and plastic dinosaurs. Jennifer dressed in a blue cotton blouse and khaki pants, sensible flats she kept by the front door. She ate a piece of toast standing at the kitchen counter, while Thomas read the sports section of the Miami Herald. They spoke briefly about weekend plans. Thomas mentioned he might take Emma to the park on Saturday if the weather cleared. Jennifer said she wanted to stop by the garden center to buy soil for the planter boxes on the porch. At 7:30, Jennifer went into Emma's room and woke her gently, smoothing back the child's dark hair. Emma had preschool that morning, a program that ran from 8:30 until noon at a church 2 blocks from their house. Thomas was responsible for drop-off on weekday mornings because his work shift at the insurance company did not start until 9:30. Jennifer gathered her purse and her library identification badge. She picked up her car keys from the hook by the front door. Thomas was loading the dishwasher. Emma was in the living room watching cartoons, still in her pajamas. Jennifer called out that she was leaving. Thomas called back from the kitchen, something generic, a confirmation that he heard her. Emma may have looked up from the television. The front door opened and closed. Jennifer's white Honda Accord, a 1997 model with 82,000 miles on the odometer, started with its usual rough idle. She backed out of the driveway at 7:45 in the morning. Mrs. Helena Cortez, who lived across the street and was retrieving her newspaper, waved. Jennifer waved back. The car turned left onto Cypress Lane and disappeared from view. Jennifer Marlowe never arrived at the library that morning. Her supervisor, a woman named Barbara Chen, called the Marlowe residence at 8:30 when Jennifer had not appeared for her 8 o'clock shift. Thomas answered. He sounded surprised. He said Jennifer had left the house on time. He said there must be traffic or perhaps car trouble. Barbara said she would try Jennifer's cell phone. The cell phone rang through to voicemail. Barbara left a message. At 9:15, Barbara called the house again. Thomas's voice was tighter this time. He said he was sure there was a simple explanation. He said he would drive the route Jennifer took to work and look for her car. At 10:47 in the morning, a stock clerk at the Palmetto Plaza shopping center noticed a white Honda Accord sitting in the far corner of the parking lot with its engine running. The shopping center was a small strip mall anchored by a Winn-Dixie grocery store, about 3 miles from the Marlowe home and 2 miles from the library. The clerk, a 19-year-old named Marcus Webb, thought it was odd that a car would be left idling for so long. He approached the vehicle. The driver's seat was empty. The keys were in the ignition. A brown leather purse sat on the passenger seat. Marcus went back inside the store and told his manager. The manager called the police. Officers from the Miami-Dade Police Department arrived at 11:15. They ran the license plate. The car was registered to Jennifer Ann Marlowe of Cypress Lane. Inside the vehicle, they found the purse containing Jennifer's wallet with her driver's license, $63 in cash, credit cards, and family photos. Her cell phone was in the cup holder between the seats. A travel mug of coffee, still faintly warm, sat in the other cup holder. The car showed no signs of damage. The doors had been unlocked. Nothing appeared to be missing. On the dashboard, in plain view, was Jennifer's library identification badge attached to a blue lanyard. The police contacted Thomas Marlowe at 12:30 in the afternoon. He arrived at the shopping center at 12:55, his face pale, his hands shaking. Officers asked him when he had last seen his wife. He said 7:45 that morning when she left for work. Officers asked if they had argued. He said no. Officers asked if Jennifer had seemed upset or troubled. He said no, she seemed completely normal. Officers asked if there were any marital problems, any financial difficulties, any reason Jennifer might leave voluntarily. Thomas Marlowe said absolutely not. He said his wife would never leave their daughter. He said something terrible must have happened. He said they needed to find her right away. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, Jennifer Marlowe had been officially reported missing. By 3 o'clock, detectives were canvassing the shopping center, interviewing employees and customers, reviewing security camera footage. The Winn-Dixie had cameras covering the front entrance and the loading dock, but none that captured the parking lot where Jennifer's car had been found. The footage from the front entrance showed dozens of people entering and leaving the store between 8 in the morning and 11 in the morning, but none matched Jennifer's description. Detectives spoke to every business in the strip mall. No one remembered seeing a woman matching Jennifer's description that morning. No one remembered seeing anyone acting suspiciously near a white Honda Accord. Thomas Marlowe returned home to Cypress Lane with Emma, who had been picked up from preschool by a neighbor when Thomas failed to arrive at noon. Detectives followed. They walked through the house with Thomas's permission, looking for anything that might explain Jennifer's disappearance. They found a tidy home with children's toys in the living room, breakfast dishes in the sink, a laundry basket of clean clothes waiting to be folded. In the master bedroom, Jennifer's side of the closet was organized by color. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, nothing obviously missing. On her nightstand was a paperback novel with a bookmark tucked halfway through. Everything suggested a woman who had every intention of returning home. Search efforts intensified as daylight faded. Law enforcement agencies coordinated with volunteers from the neighborhood. Teams walked the route between the Marlowe home and the shopping center, checking drainage ditches and empty lots. Helicopters circled overhead with thermal imaging cameras. Bloodhounds were brought to the shopping center parking lot, given Jennifer's scent from clothing taken from her home. The dogs circled the Honda Accord but picked up no trail leading away from the vehicle. It was as if Jennifer had simply evaporated from the front seat of her own car. By nightfall on March 17, more than 100 people were searching for Jennifer Marlowe. Thomas remained at the house with Emma, sitting on the living room couch, answering the same questions over and over for different detectives. Yes, their marriage was fine. No, Jennifer had no history of mental illness. No, she had never mentioned feeling threatened by anyone. No, there was no other man, no other woman, no secret life he was aware of. He was cooperative, almost too cooperative, his answers coming quickly, his demeanor hovering between anxious and strangely composed. Detective Sarah Winters, a 12-year veteran of the Miami-Dade Police Department, was assigned as the lead investigator. She sat across from Thomas Marlowe in his living room that first evening and watched him carefully. He maintained eye contact. He answered questions directly. He volunteered information without prompting, but Detective Winters noticed things. She noticed that Thomas had not cried, not once during the entire day. She noticed that he referred to Jennifer in the past tense twice, then corrected himself. She noticed that when Emma asked where Mommy was, Thomas told her Mommy was at work, even though it was 8 o'clock at night. Detective Winters made notes. She underlined certain phrases. She wrote in the margin of her notepad, "Watch this one." The first inconsistency emerged that evening when detectives measured the distance and drive time between the Marlowe home and the shopping center. Using the most direct route, the drive took 6 minutes. Using back roads to avoid traffic, the drive took 8 minutes. Jennifer had left home at 7:45. Her car was discovered, with the engine still running at 10:47. Even accounting for variable drive times, that meant Jennifer's car had been parked in that lot for at least 2.5 hours, possibly longer. The coffee in the cup holder suggested she had arrived more recently than that. But store employees were certain the car had been there since at least 9:30, when the morning rush of shoppers began arriving. One cashier specifically remembered noticing a white Honda idling in the far corner of the lot when she arrived for her 9 o'clock shift. This created a problem in the timeline. If Jennifer left home at 7:45 and her car was at the shopping center by 9 o'clock at the latest, where had she been for over an hour? The shopping center was not on the route between her home and the library. It required a deliberate detour. Detectives asked Thomas if Jennifer had mentioned stopping anywhere that morning. He said no. They asked if she had a habit of running errands before work. He said no, she always went straight to the library. Over the weekend, the investigation expanded. Jennifer's family arrived from Coral Gables. Her mother, Patricia Hammond, was barely functional, her face swollen from crying, her hands gripping a tissue that disintegrated in her fingers. Jennifer's father, Robert Hammond, spoke to the media, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. He described his daughter as a devoted mother and wife, someone who would never willingly leave her family. He said they were offering a $10,000 reward for information, leading to Jennifer's safe return. The media descended on Palmetto Bay. Local television news crews parked on Cypress Lane, filming the Marlowe house, interviewing neighbors. The story spread to regional newspapers, then to national news outlets. Missing Florida Mother became a headline, accompanied by Jennifer's most recent photo, a picture from Emma's 4th birthday party where Jennifer smiled at the camera, her arm around her daughter, both wearing paper party hats. The photograph ran in the Miami Herald, the Sun Sentinel, the Palm Beach Post. It appeared on the evening news broadcasts. It was shared on early internet forums and missing persons websites. Volunteers organized search parties that continued through the following week. They combed through wooded areas near the shopping center. They searched vacant buildings and abandoned properties. They walked the banks of canals and retention ponds. Divers from the police department searched bodies of water within a 5-mile radius of where the car was found. They found nothing. No clothing. No signs of struggle. No body. Detectives interviewed everyone in Jennifer's life. Co-workers at the library said she was professional and well-liked, though not especially social. She ate lunch at her desk most days. She rarely joined co-workers for happy hour after work. Her supervisor, Barbara Chen, said Jennifer had seemed completely normal in the days leading up to her disappearance. She had been working on a project to reorganize the children's section. She had submitted a proposal for summer reading programs. Nothing suggested she was planning to leave or that anything was troubling her. Investigators looked into the Marlowe finances. They found nothing suspicious. The couple had a joint checking account with about $4,000. They had a mortgage on the house, a car payment on Thomas's truck, standard credit card debt. There were no large withdrawals, no unusual purchases, no evidence of financial strain beyond the normal pressures of a young family. Thomas made approximately $38,000 a year at the insurance company. Jennifer made $26,000 at the library. They lived within their means. Detectives dug deeper into Thomas Marlowe's background. He had grown up in Fort Lauderdale, the only child of Carol and Dennis Marlowe. Dennis had passed in 1994 from a heart attack. Carol had remarried in 1998 to a man named Richard Stokes, a retired electrician. Thomas had attended community college for 3 years before transferring to the University of Miami. His academic record was unremarkable. He had worked various jobs: warehouse work, retail, the coffee shop where he met Jennifer. His employment history showed frequent job changes, though nothing that raised immediate red flags. He had no criminal record, no history of violence. No restraining orders or domestic disturbance calls to the Cypress Lane address. But as detectives interviewed people who knew Thomas, a pattern emerged in the descriptions. People used words like charming and helpful, but also intense and controlling. An old roommate from his community college days said Thomas had a temper that could flare suddenly, though it never got physical that he witnessed. A coworker from the insurance company said Thomas talked about his wife constantly, always needing to know where she was, calling her multiple times during the workday. Jennifer's college roommate, a woman named Rachel Diaz, told detectives that before the marriage, Jennifer had expressed concerns about how possessive Thomas could be. Rachel said Jennifer had considered breaking up with him once, but Thomas had become so distraught, so insistent that he would change, that Jennifer had relented. Those who knew him said he seemed to need constant reassurance. They said he struggled when Jennifer worked late or attended library conferences. They said he had once shown up unannounced at the library on Jennifer's lunch break, claiming he was just in the neighborhood, though the insurance company where he worked was 15 miles away. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves about the husband who remained so calm while his wife was missing, the husband who had already consulted with a lawyer by day 3 of the investigation. The husband whose story never wavered but whose timeline did not quite add up. On March 24, 1 week after Jennifer's disappearance, detectives asked Thomas to take a polygraph test. He agreed immediately. The test was administered at the Miami-Dade Police Headquarters. Thomas sat in a small room, sensors attached to his chest and fingers, and answered questions for 90 minutes. The polygrapher later told Detective Winter that Thomas showed deception on several key questions, particularly those about the morning Jennifer disappeared and about whether he knew where Jennifer was now. The results were inconclusive by legal standards but suggestive enough that detectives increased their focus on Thomas Marlowe as a person of interest. But there was a problem. There was no evidence. No body. No witnesses placing Thomas anywhere but at home that morning. He had a credible alibi for the time period after Jennifer left the house. He had dropped Emma at preschool at 8:25. Signed the attendance sheet in the presence of 2 teachers. He had arrived at work at 9:15, his time card punch documented, multiple coworkers seeing him at his desk by 9:30. Unless Jennifer had somehow returned home after leaving at 7:45, which made no sense given the location of her car. Thomas could not have been physically present when whatever happened to Jennifer occurred. Detectives considered other scenarios. Had Jennifer met someone at the shopping center? Had she been followed from her house and forced to drive to that location? Had she witnessed something, been in the wrong place at the wrong time? They reviewed hundreds of hours of security footage from businesses along the possible routes Jennifer might have taken that morning. They found nothing conclusive. A white Honda Accord matching Jennifer's appeared on one camera at 7:52 in the morning, traveling south on Old Cutler Road, which could have been Jennifer driving normally, or could have been any one of thousands of similar vehicles in Miami-Dade County. By April, the investigation had stalled. Search efforts were scaled back. Media attention drifted to other stories. The tip line continued to receive calls, but none led anywhere promising. Detective Winters worked the case obsessively, reviewing evidence, re-interviewing witnesses, driving the routes herself at different times of day. She became convinced that Thomas Marlowe knew more than he was saying, but conviction without evidence is merely suspicion. The case did not close officially, but it cooled, joining the growing file of unsolved disappearances that haunted South Florida. By summer of 2000, Thomas and Emma Marlowe still lived on Cypress Lane, though the house felt different now. Neighbors stopped waving. Reporters occasionally knocked on the door. Thomas hired a lawyer and stopped speaking to the press. Jennifer's parents visited frequently in those first months, Patricia Hammond holding Emma for hours, reading her stories, crying silently in the bathroom when she thought no one could hear. Robert Hammond barely spoke to Thomas, The tension in the house became suffocating. In September, Thomas announced he was moving. He told Jennifer's parents that Palmetto Bay held too many painful memories, that Emma needed a fresh start, that he had found a job opportunity in Tampa. Patricia and Robert protested. They wanted to remain close to Emma, their only grandchild, their last connection to Jennifer. Thomas was polite but firm. He said the decision was made. In October, the house on Cypress Lane was put up for sale. By November, Thomas and Emma were gone. They moved to a small rental house in Brandon, a suburb east of Tampa, far enough from Palmetto Bay that people did not recognize the name Marlowe, did not remember the missing mother, whose face had been on the news. Thomas took a job at another insurance company. Emma enrolled in a new elementary school. Thomas's mother, Carol, moved closer to help with childcare. The new life was quieter, more isolated. Thomas rarely socialized. He dropped Emma at school and picked her up precisely on time every day. He attended parent-teacher conferences alone. When Emma brought home school forms asking for emergency contacts, there was only Thomas's name and his mother's name, no one else. Emma was 6 years old now, then 7, then 8. She was a quiet child, serious beyond her years, with dark hair like her mother and watchful eyes. She drew pictures in art class at school, houses with empty windows, stick figures standing alone, trees without leaves. Her teachers noted that Emma rarely mentioned her mother. When asked about family, Emma would say it was just her and her dad. Once, a teacher gently asked what had happened to Emma's mom. Emma looked at the floor and said her mom had gone away. The teacher did not press further. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the terrible weight of unspoken questions, who have watched someone close to you carry a secret like a stone, you might understand what those years were like for Emma Marlowe. She was too young to articulate what she sensed, too dependent on her father to challenge the silence, but children know things. They know when adults are lying. They know when the air in a room feels wrong. Emma knew. In 2003, when Emma was 8, Thomas remarried. The woman's name was Diane Porter, a receptionist at the insurance company where Thomas worked. Diane was 35, divorced, no children of her own. She was kind to Emma, or tried to be, but Emma remained distant, polite but unreachable. The marriage changed the household dynamic. Diane asked questions that Thomas deflected. She noticed that there were no photos of Jennifer anywhere in the house, that Thomas never mentioned his first wife, that Emma seemed to flinch when certain topics arose. Diane later told investigators that she began to feel uncomfortable in the marriage by the second year. She said Thomas had moods that darkened without warning. She said he needed to know where she was constantly. She said he checked her phone, her emails, her mileage on the car. She said that when she asked about Jennifer, Thomas became cold and said the subject was closed, that his first wife had abandoned the family and he did not want her name spoken in the house. Diane said she started to wonder what had really happened. She said she began to watch Thomas differently. She said she noticed how he looked at Emma sometimes, with something that might have been guilt or might have been calculation. In 2005, Diane filed for divorce. She told her lawyer that she felt afraid, though she could not explain exactly why. The divorce was finalized quickly. Thomas kept the house. Emma remained with Thomas. Diane moved to Orlando and tried to forget the Marlowe family, though she told friends she worried about the girl, the quiet daughter who never smiled. The years accumulated like sediment. Emma turned 10, then 12, then 14. She became a teenager who spent hours alone in her room, who wore dark clothing and listened to music through headphones. She did adequately in school but had few friends. Thomas's mother, Carol, worried about Emma but felt powerless to help. Carol had remarried and was busy with her own life. She visited once a month, took Emma shopping, tried to talk to her, but Emma revealed nothing. The silence had become Emma's inheritance, the one thing her father had given her that she could not escape. In 2007, Thomas lost his job at the insurance company. The official reason was downsizing, but colleagues whispered that there had been complaints about Thomas's behavior, about angry outbursts directed at coworkers, about accusations that he had been inappropriately accessing customer files. Thomas found work at a smaller firm, then another, moving laterally through the industry, never quite failing but never quite succeeding. Money became tighter. The rental house in Brandon gave way to a smaller apartment. Emma wore clothes that did not quite fit, shoes with worn soles. She learned not to ask for things. By 2010, Emma was 15 and beginning to understand things she had tried not to understand for most of her life. She had vague memories of that morning in March 2000, fragments that surfaced in dreams. She remembered her mother kissing her goodbye. She remembered her father in the kitchen. She remembered something else, something that did not fit the story she had been told. She remembered her mother's car returning to the driveway after she thought her mother had left for work. She remembered voices, her parents arguing, muffled and urgent. She remembered her father leaving the house in her mother's car, coming back later in his truck. She remembered her father telling her that mommy had to go away, that it was just going to be the two of them now. For 10 years, Emma had pushed these memories down, unsure if they were real or imagined, terrified of what they might mean. But at 15, memory becomes sharper. Context becomes clearer. Emma started to research her mother's disappearance online, reading old news articles, looking at missing person websites. She learned that people had suspected her father. She learned that the case had never been solved. She learned that her mother's body had never been found. Emma started having nightmares. She woke in the middle of the night, convinced she could hear her mother calling her name. She became withdrawn, barely speaking to Thomas, avoiding being alone with him. Thomas noticed the change. He asked what was wrong. Emma said nothing. He pressed. Emma remained silent. The apartment felt smaller every day. In April 2011, Emma's high school guidance counselor, a woman named Ms. Patricia Vega, called Emma into her office. Ms. Vega had noticed the change in Emma's demeanor, the darkness that seemed to follow the girl through the hallways. She asked if everything was okay at home. Emma said yes. Ms. Vega asked if Emma felt safe. Emma hesitated. Ms. Vega asked again gently. Emma started to cry. What Emma told Ms. Vega that afternoon would reopen a case that had been cold for 11 years. Emma said she needed to tell someone what she remembered. She said she had been 5 years old when her mother disappeared. She said she remembered more than she had ever admitted. She said her mother had left the house that morning, but then had come back. She said she remembered her parents fighting, her mother's voice rising, something about leaving, something about taking Emma. She said she remembered her father's face, dark and frightening. She said she remembered her mother's car leaving again, but this time her father was driving it. She said she remembered her father returning hours later without the car, his clothes dirty, his hands shaking. She said she remembered him telling her that mommy was gone, that she was never coming back, that Emma must never tell anyone what she had seen because it would mean losing daddy too. Ms. Vega listened. She took notes. She told Emma that she was required by law to report certain things, that what Emma was describing was serious, that people needed to hear this. Emma nodded. She said she understood. She said she was ready. Ms. Vega contacted the school's resource officer immediately. The resource officer contacted the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. By that evening, Emma was giving a formal statement to detectives. By the following morning, the Palmetto Bay case file for Jennifer Marlowe had been pulled from archives. By afternoon, Detective Sarah Winters, who had never stopped thinking about Jennifer Marlowe, received a phone call that made her hands shake. The case reopened officially on April 18, 2011. Detectives from both Hillsborough County and Miami-Dade County coordinated. They interviewed Emma multiple times carefully, with child psychologists present. Emma's story remained consistent. She described details that matched the evidence from 2000. She described her mother's blue blouse, the coffee mug in the car, the timing that had never made sense. She said her father had made her mother come back home that morning. She said there had been a fight. She said her father had told her mother that if Jennifer left him, she would regret it. Emma said she did not know exactly what happened next because her father had sent her to her room. She said she heard sounds, banging, her mother screaming briefly, then silence. She said when her father came to get her an hour later, her mother was gone. She said her father drove her to preschool in his truck, the same truck he always drove. She said that when her father picked her up from preschool that afternoon, he was driving her mother's Honda. She said they drove to the shopping center. She said her father parked the car and told Emma to stay in the truck. She said she watched her father get out of her mother's car, wipe down the steering wheel with his shirt, take her mother's purse from the trunk and put it on the front seat. She said her father locked the car and got into his truck and they drove away. Emma said her father told her that Mommy had decided to leave them, that Mommy did not love them anymore. She said her father said that if Emma ever told anyone the truth, they would take her away and she would never see him again, that she would go to a bad place where no one would take care of her. Emma said she believed him. She said she had been 5 years old and terrified. She said she had kept the secret for 11 years. Detectives asked Emma if she knew where her mother was now. Emma said no. She said her father never told her. She said she had always assumed her mother's body was somewhere far away, somewhere no one would ever find it. She said she used to imagine her mother buried in a field or weighted down in water or hidden in the woods. She said these thoughts had haunted her entire childhood. Armed with Emma's testimony, investigators obtained search warrants. On April 22, 2011, police descended on the apartment where Thomas and Emma Marlowe lived in Brandon. Thomas was at work. Officers waited for him to return. When his truck pulled into the parking lot at 6:15 that evening, detectives approached. Thomas saw them and his face went pale. He asked what this was about. Detective Winters, who had flown up from Miami specifically for the arrest, told him. Thomas Marlowe was arrested at 6:20 in the evening on April 22, 2011, and charged with the unlawful confinement and suspected homicide of Jennifer Ann Marlowe. He was read his rights. He said nothing. His face was blank, the same composed expression he had worn 11 years earlier when he reported his wife missing. Detectives transported him to the Hillsborough County Jail. Emma was placed in temporary custody with Child Protective Services while Jennifer's parents, now in their 60s, petitioned for guardianship. The arrest made national news. Florida cold case solved after daughter comes forward, read the headlines. Jennifer's photo appeared again in newspapers and on television, alongside the booking photo of Thomas Marlowe, now 43 years old, his hair graying, his face harder than it had been in 2000. Media crews returned to Palmetto Bay, interviewing old neighbors who remembered the case. Mrs. Helena Cortez, who had waved to Jennifer that final morning, told reporters she had always suspected something was wrong, that the husband had seemed too calm, too controlled. Detectives worked to build the case. Without a body, prosecution would be difficult but not impossible. They had Emma's testimony. They had the inconsistencies from 2000 that had never been explained. They had the failed polygraph. They had witnesses who described Thomas's controlling behavior. They had the suspicious timing of the move to Tampa, the isolation, the pattern of behavior that suggested a man with something to hide. Investigators searched the old Cypress Lane property, now owned by a different family. They brought cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar, They dug up sections of the backyard. They found nothing. They searched properties Thomas had access to in 2000, his mother's house in Delray Beach, a storage unit he had rented briefly, the wooded area behind his workplace. They found nothing. Jennifer's body remained missing, her final resting place known only to Thomas Marlowe, and he was not talking. Thomas's lawyer, a Tampa-based defense attorney named Michael Brennan, argued that Emma's testimony was unreliable, that she had been 5 years old at the time, that memory is notoriously fallible, that she could have constructed a narrative from things she heard or read over the years. He argued that there was no physical evidence linking Thomas to any harm. He argued that Jennifer could have left voluntarily, staged the abandoned car, started a new life somewhere. He pointed out that without a body, without forensic evidence, without witnesses, the case was built on the word of a troubled teenager who had spent her formative years believing her mother had abandoned her. The prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney Lauren Matthews, countered that Emma's testimony was detailed and consistent, that it explained the timeline discrepancies that had plagued the investigation from day one, that it provided a coherent narrative for what had happened. Matthews argued that Thomas had motive, a failing marriage, a controlling personality, a wife who wanted to leave. She argued that Thomas had opportunity, time alone with Jennifer that morning after she returned home, time to dispose of evidence. She argued that Thomas had engaged in consciousness of guilt behavior, the immediate move away from Palmetto Bay, the isolation of his daughter, the years of silence. The trial began in January 2012 in Tampa. It lasted 3 weeks. Emma Marlowe, now 16 years old, testified for 2 days. She sat in the witness box wearing a gray sweater, her hair pulled back, her voice steady but quiet. She described what she remembered. She described living with the secret. She described the fear that had shaped her entire childhood. Defense attorneys cross-examined her aggressively, trying to find inconsistencies, trying to suggest that her memories were fabricated or influenced. Emma did not waver. She looked at her father across the courtroom and said clearly, "I know what I saw." Forensic psychologists testified about childhood memory, about trauma, about the reliability of Emma's testimony. Expert witnesses debated technical details. Jennifer's mother, Patricia Hammond, testified about her daughter's character, about her devotion to Emma, about the impossibility that Jennifer would have voluntarily abandoned her child. Thomas's former co-workers testified about his controlling behavior. The failed polygraph results were admitted. The timeline evidence was presented in exhaustive detail. Thomas Marlowe did not testify. He sat at the defense table, his face impassive, taking notes occasionally, whispering to his attorney. He showed no emotion when Emma testified. He showed no emotion when Jennifer's mother broke down crying on the stand. He showed no emotion when the prosecution displayed the photograph of Jennifer from Emma's birthday party, the last picture ever taken of her alive. On January 27, 2012, the jury deliberated for 19 hours over 3 days. On the third day, they reached a verdict. The courtroom was packed. Emma sat in the front row between her grandparents, holding her grandmother's hand. The jury foreman stood. The judge asked if they had reached a verdict. The foreman said they had.